Everyone, today I'm going to give a lecture on Communication N6, Communication N6 Module 1, which is motivation, the topic motivation. So I'm going to start by defining what is motivation. So motivation is the name for the internal psychological processes that makes an individual willing to spend energy and make persistent effort in order to attain a psychological or a physical goal. Everyone, we all have goals that we want to achieve. So what makes you want to put more energy, or more effort in achieving a certain goal? That's what you call motivation. That psychological process whereby you are willing to put more effort and more energy so that you can achieve a goal. That's what you call motivation. Motivation. So I'm going to move on to the degree of motivation. The degree of motivation. I'm going to move on to the degree of motivation. So the degree of motivation is grouped into two categories. The first one is the strength of internal motives, right? So we'll be discussing more on Maslow's needs. Maslow's needs. I'm sure and I believe that you understand Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So those needs, they fall under two categories. Those needs, they fall under two categories, which are the physiological needs. So physiological needs are those needs for survival, needs for survival, needs to stay alive, needs to stay alive, to survive, right? So we are talking about needs like food, shelter, water. You need shelter, you need water to survive. You need water to survive. These are what you call physiological needs, right? So lack of those needs, it means that you will not survive. So these physiological needs, they form the lowest needs, base level, if they are not satisfied, right? So if they're not satisfied, you will not survive. So that's what you call, these are what you call primary needs. Without them, you will not survive. You will not survive. A person cannot survive without food, without water, without shelter, without warmth. You will not survive. So those are what you call physiological needs. Right. Um, we also have what you call psychological needs, which occurs on the next 40 levels, right? We are saying from um, safety and security needs, social needs, esteem needs, and self-actualization needs. They are not, if they are not satisfied these levels of needs, you are able to survive. One is able to survive. One is able to survive. If those needs are not satisfied, one is able to survive. So these are what you call primary needs. They are what you call primary needs. Without them, one can survive. One can survive without safety, without security. One can survive uh, um, without social needs. One can survive without esteem needs and also without self-actualization needs. So uh, one can survive with without those needs. We call them what? Secondary needs, right? So I'm going to move on to one can survive with these needs, right? Right. So I'm going to move on to the final level of needs, which is the growth need, which is the growth needs, the growth needs. So when these are satisfied, one can grow, one can grow. They are called deficiencies, needs. So, meaning to say, if these are not satisfied, one can either survive or you can feel anxious and tense, but you can survive. You can survive. So, the final level of needs are the growth needs. When they are satisfied, when they are given, when they are administered, you will grow. One will grow, right? So they are also called what? A deficiency. Meaning to say, if they are not satisfied, there is a deficiency. You can survive, but you can feel anxious. You can feel tense, right? We're talking about 2 to 4 levels, a level of need, right? Needs, right? Let's talk about factors that influence the ability to focus, which is number two, which is the number two category, the second category. Factors that influence the ability to focus and maintain action, right? So there are factors like need. So you can find that if you strongly need something, if the need is very strong, what is going to happen? You are going to put more or a lot of effort into satisfying it. When the need is very strong, you put a lot of effort to satisfy that need, right? The second factor is um, expectations, right? So we can find that if you feel that our goals are realistic meaning to say we can be able to attain them, we can be able to achieve them, what is going to happen? It will make us work more harder and get them right. If you feel like these goals are realistic, these goals are, we will make an effort to work very hard to achieve them, right? Expectations. If the expectations um, are are realistic, we are going to work hard to achieve those needs. And then number three, potential. If one believes that he is physically and mentally uh, able to achieve a certain goal, it means that he is likely to be more motivated to achieve that goal. If you feel like physically you can able, mentally, and you have the skills, you have the ability, and also your personality it can help you to achieve that goal, you are likely to be more motivated to achieve it. Right? So if we have the physical, intellectual, skills, ability, and also our personality, the closer the goal fits what we are capable of achieving, the more motivated we'll become. We'll become more motivated if uh, we know that we have a potential to achieve a certain goal. If you feel like you have a potential, you have that ability to achieve a certain goal, you'll be more motivated to achieve that goal, right? So let's move on to the nature of motives, right? You can find that motives are very difficult to identify. So before we go further, let's discuss what are motives. You can find that motives are drives. They are drives. They are also motives are drives. What drives the desires? Ah, those are what you call motives. The desires, the drive to achieve something. These are what you call the desires. If you have the desire to achieve something, that's what you call motives. So you can find that those desires, those drives are very difficult to identify. It is very difficult to identify the motives, right? And also you can find that motives are conscious. They are conscious, mean to say those thoughts, those feelings, those desires are not accessible to conscious. we awareness, but it can sorry, those are the conscious desires is when they are driven by the feelings that we have, the thoughts, the values that we have, right? And also you can also find that they are pre-conscious. They are pre-conscious, meaning to say they are not accessible. They cannot, they are not in our conscious, right, ness, but we can easily bring them into consciousness. And then you can find that motives are subconscious. I mean to say they are those thoughts and feelings and desires, they are not accessible to our conscious awareness, but can influence our behavior, right? And lastly, and also you can find that motives can prompt they can prompt the individual to perform or to action. Motives, desires, they can make an individual to put more effort, to put more energy to achieve them. They can uh, influence a person to act in a certain way. So these are the nature of motives. They are difficult to identify. They could be conscious, preconscious, and subconscious. And also, they prompt the individual to action. They can make you act in a certain way. Right. So I'm going to move on to the factors influencing motivation. Factors influencing motivation, which includes the first one that I'm going to discuss is what we call policy, the policy of the organization. So when we're talking about policy is defined as the principles or rules in place to guide the decisions and achieve rational outcomes in an organization. You can find that they are policies, set of rules, the principles that guides management and employees in making a decision in order to achieve goals within an organization. So the way in which the policy of the organization is formulated and applied, it can also reflect the values and the attitudes of management. The way the policy is applied, the way it is formulated, it can influence the attitudes and the values of management, right? So we have 4 levels of trust that the management might have on employees. You can find that management might have complete confidence and trust in employees. The management might have a complete confidence and trust in employees. And then you can find that it might have contesting confidence and trust in the employees. They might have contesting confidence and trust in the employees. Or the management might also have substantial but not complete trust in the employees, right? And lastly, they might have no confidence and trust in the employees. These are the 4 levels of trust that management might have towards employees. Management might have a complete confidence and trust in the employee, meaning to say, if it has complete confidence in the employees and trust, it believes and the employees, it believes or it trusts the employees in the sense that they can even involve them in decision making, right? But if management has no confidence and trust in the employees, meaning to say the management might not even involve employees in decision making processes because they don't trust, they don't have confidence in the employees, right? So I'm going to move on to the next factor, which influence motivation, which is remuneration. Remuneration, we are talking about compensation. Compensation that the employee gets, compensation that the employee gets from his job. So normally, compensation will be in form of salaries and wages. Salaries and wages. A salary is that money or the amount of money that the employee receive at a regular, maybe at a specific interval, right? And it is the money that the employee receive at a specific interview interval, right? So it is the money that is paid for work done, the money that the employee receives for work done. We call it what? Remuneration. So it is clearly a great motivating factor within an organization, right? So when one feels that his reward, so let's move on to the aspect of motivation. We talk about payoff, right? So it is the money paid for work done, and it is workers' right, the money that you get, right? It also what influence what the employees' motivation, right? Let's move on to the reward, which is the bonus payment for good results, right? We also call it it is also called incentives. Employees want to work hard to earn extra remuneration. So remuneration can satisfy higher levels of needs, higher, le higher level need. So reward management needs not to be money sometimes. Sometimes an employee might desire, for example, a spacious office, which is a large office. He might desire a car or a training course, or it might be a way in which his or her status will increase, right? So it depending on the what, on the employee, right? A reward. So what are we saying? We are saying when an employee feels that his remuneration is matches with his effort, he tends to be more motivated than when he feels that what he's earning and his effort does not tally. He ends up becoming demotivated to perform his work, right? Let's move on to Hezebeck's theory. Right. So Hezebeck normally simplify Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Right. What did he do? He grouped Maslow's five levels of Maslow into two factors. Right. And then he called the first factor hygiene factors. Hygiene factors. So hygiene factors includes physiological needs, safety and security needs, and social needs, right? And also he grouped the higher level of needs into motivational factors, which are esteem needs and self-actualization needs, right? I group them into uh, two factors: hygiene needs factors and motivational factors. Hygiene needs are those three lower level needs. And then motivational factors are Maslow's two higher level of needs, which is esteem need and self-actualization need, right? So the third factor includes um, supervision, which is the action or a process of watching and directing what someone does not or how something is done, right? So motivation, when you supervision. And so we are saying supervision can also influence motivation, can also influence motivation. So let's move on to the effective goal setting. We are saying goals should be clearly defined, and then they are supposed to be realistic and should be attainable. The goals of the organization, they are supposed to be realistic, they are supposed to be clearly defined and attainable, right? Employees are supposed to, management or employees within the organization are supposed to attain the goals of the organization. And also lastly, the another factor that influence motivation is the working environment. The working environment, right? What did Heisenberg say, right? So Heisenberg factors led to the working environment. The management should make sure that the employees are not dissatisfied with the working environment. So what did he say? He's saying the working environment should be physically acceptable, meaning to say there should be enough aeration, there should be less noise within an organization so that people will be able to perform well, right? And he also said they should be safe. It's supposed to be safe, right? So we're saying employees should feel safe, should feel safe within an organization. For example, there should be no electric wires lying around. There should be no object that are scattered on the floor that might also cause accidents. Employees should feel safe. They should feel safe within an organization. They should feel safe. They should feel safe within an organization, right? And then we also said um, right. We also talked about satisfying social needs, right? So we are saying, you also said the environment should encourage employees to form good relationships within the organization. They should socialize, they should relax, they should form a relaxation um, uh, groups, etc. For example, they should form friendship within an organization. Also social groups, friendship. They should also have social groups, so that they can socialize. So you're saying the environment, the working environment should allow employees to socialize, to relax, right, within an organization. Right. So let's move on to the influence of motivation. The influence of motivation. The influence of motivation. The influence of motivation on communication, right? So I'm going to start by satisfaction of needs, satisfaction of needs, satisfaction of needs. We need to say, employees who are given the opportunity to discuss problems they experience, those employees who are allowed or who are given an opportunity to discuss problems, they experience a greater sense of physiological well-being in terms of a healthier and physical working environment. They have a greater sense of physiological well-being, right? They are healthy, right? And also they have a greater psychological well-being, right? A greater psychological well-being. Psychologically, they are fit. They are fit. And also you can find that they experience increased productivity and greater profits, right? Because they feel that they are part of management. They feel that the organization or the management recognize their ideas, their opinions, their suggestions. And also you can find that they can experience greater self-realization, self-actualization, right? So there is satisfaction of needs when motivation, when people are motivated, right, and employees are allowed to communicate within an organization, right. There is also blockage of needs, right. If the needs are not satisfied, motivation is usually poor, right? For example, if maybe employees have needs, but the management could not satisfy these needs, you can find that motivation becomes low or poor, right? So this often is reflected in negative communication, right? When they feel like when and they have unsatisfied needs, or the management did not fulfill their needs, they end up you end up seeing so many gossips at work, people gossiping, rumors, grapevines at work, negative communication, distortion of information, etc. Right? And also you can find that an individual may find either rational or irrational ways of what? coping. One might find a rational way of coping or an irrational way of coping, right? So I'm going to discuss causes of poor communication or negative communication within the organization, right? We can find that there is irrational behavior, coping of behavior, irrational coping behavior, whereby a person can end up being frustrated, can be aggressive, maybe regression or empathy, right? And then how does a person react uh, in any rational way? You can find that he might also find compensation, which involves setting an alternative goal for himself. If the original goal has failed, you look for another alternative, right? You look for another alternative to compensate for the failed goal, right? So you can behave rationally by suppressing the real reason for one's behavior and presenting a seemingly logical and social acceptable one. You can present a what? A, a, a logical, socially acceptable reason for for acting or for behaving, right? So thank you so much. Don't forget to hit the subscription button so that when I post, you'll be able to see the notifications. You receive notifications. So thank you so much. Have a good day.